Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm going to do a quick video just to give you some of the skill set that you're dealing with if you elect an NDP government. Currently, right now, like any party, they have what they call a shadow cabinet. That shadow cabinet has people that basically their role is to criticize government policy. In the particular case of the NDP, the only one that seems to be that Mr. Mulcair relies on for economic policy or finance critic is Nathan Cullen. So I'm going to basically walk you through who Nathan Cullen is. I'll walk you through who he is and what riding he serves. So Nathan Cullen is basically he's a member of parliament for BC, and basically his background is all about he went to school, basically worked for not-for-profit groups, basically in urban development and different things for helping countries handle basically poverty stuff and issues like that. So he's always worked kind of in not-for-profit side. He's never really worked in business. His background is he's a grad, but he's got no business background in terms of his credential, no financing or accounting background in terms of that. So when you're assessing policy, you at least should have a bare minimum of some economics, at least some finance background, because GDP and balance of payments are not something that you can understand or comment on unless you've got some sort of background in economics policy. Yes, Nathan Cullen probably has a campaign team or a policy team that he can leverage, but you still, as a key critic, still need to have a bit of a background in that area. So let me tell you about Nathan Cullen's writing. He's basically northern BC. The major area of Port City is Prince Rupert. The natural resources area are Terrence and Kitimat. Now, this is interesting why I put this up here. Prince Rupert has had a lot of investment over the past few years, probably the last 5 to 6 years, and that's all related to taking some of the burden off Vancouver and to help expand export market to Asia. One thing you'll never hear from Mr. Cullen is the fact that basically the resource bases or the market in Prince Rupert has had foreign help, or not foreign help, but federal help, either from the federal government in terms of money and grants to help that port expand, as well as the BC government to support exports. Exports are critical to drive the economy, but you'll never hear that from Nathan Cullen. Why? Because he can't run or get elected on that policy. He has to play to the roots of NDP or to his local loyals, which are union members. The other one I have listed there is Terrence and Kitimat. Well, Terrence and Kitimat are all part of the forestry and also aluminum smelting around there. And if you start looking at NDP policies, then you're going to be looking at them that they put little value in resource extraction and mining. And yet that's a key area in those writings in terms of job and job creation. My question when I've ever posted things on Nathan Cullen's page is, what has he really done for his writing? I've done some research. I see absolutely nothing that he's done in terms of representation. So this is critical, that when you start looking at this, not just about who Nathan Cullen is in terms of his writing, that he works for the same party that doesn't promote certain aspects of economic growth. Now, back in June, Mulcair decided to have his critic make an assessment of a statement by Joe Oliver, who at the time was the Minister of Finance. And he basically did a bunch of red hacks, basically, of policies in terms of what's going on the overview in terms of the statement to quantify what was happening with GDP. And you'll see the red marks there. He talks about basically, he discounts issues with the global economy. He talks about household debt. He talks about income tax splitting. He talks about the Bank of Canada. He's just putting a lot of buzzwords up there. They're not aligned with any facts. And I'm going to walk you through 3 or 4 slides to kind of discredit the statements by basically Nathan Cullen. So let's talk about the world economy and how fragile it is. Now, Nathan Cullen does not talk about this, but in essence, 60% of the worldwide GDP is within 3 areas. That's China, Europe, and the US. So Canada exports to the US, exports to Europe, and exports to China. If those areas are seeing slower than normal growth, that's going to impact on our exports. Yet Nathan Cullen doesn't want to talk about that. Why? Because he can't go into the details of what's driving that. So basically, he seems to think that Harper has control over these type of policies, and he does not. Now, what's helped Canada in terms of the economy is we've had stronger than normal sales in areas like housing starts, consumer spending, and basically overall labor market's been strong. So in essence, despite with all that's being said, yes, we measure technically a recession by drops in GDP. However, we also look at other aspects of the economy. Are other things telling us that we are in a bit of a more of a doldrum? And that's not necessarily the case. And if you don't believe me, you can go out to the Bank of Nova Scotia and look at a comment called recession, non-recession, and they went into specific details that I've just discussed. Let's talk about income tax splitting. I've done my own analysis on it, and you can go out there and look at it. You can go out and look at for my PowerPoint presentation on income taxation, where I've actually looked at all aspects of taxation. There's two things I want you to take away from here. It benefits 52% of the families. Now, income tax splitting is more known as family tax credit. Now, it's all part of the tax reforms from the tax cuts that's been introduced since 2006, the GST cut, as well as some boutique tax credits, whether it's the caregivers and all that. That's all part of the tax reforms. Yet you'll never hear the NDP talk about that. Why? Because they can't win on tax reforms. They have to kind of show that Harper is only caring about one demographic. So they're just hoping that the NDP supporters will never read or watch videos of actual facts. So that in a nutshell is basically the key areas that Nathan Cullen talked about. He did talk about household debt as well, but there's some myths about that as well. The actual equity of households are actually improved. The debt itself, a lot of that's beyond the control of necessary government setting policy. If people don't live within their budgets or are kind of doing ridiculous things in terms of their household planning, it shouldn't be the government's role to bail these people out. People need to be more responsible, but you'll never hear that from the NDP. Why? Because they want to be the champions for the people. This kind of gives you an example of when you deal with NDP people, they do not deal with complete facts. They like to play with emotion, and Nathan Cullen is just one of those people.